As expected, Oakwynd has recaptured the title for most populated TLP with the help of the Planes of Power expansion release. So we can see the chart that's on my website, everquestguides.com. You can see the blue line is the pre-Planes of Power release, and then the yellow line being Planes of Power release. So you can see on the release date that a shit ton of players came back, or characters I should say, came back and played on that server. And then as you've seen over time, it's kind of balanced out a little bit, but there is still a decent sized gap between active characters on Oakwynd and on Mischief. I think it's down to about 300-ish, 300 to 400-ish more characters are online at a time on Oakwynd over Mischief. And we'll continue to track this to see how long the Planes of Power expansion is actually popular for, and if it does indeed dip below the Mischief server population. Keep in mind, I think in the next 3 weeks or so, the Mischief server will be releasing House of Ghoul, which has been voted by many places as one of the most popular later expansions. So we'll see if they get a boost that pushes them back above, and how the Planes of Power expansion is doing in 3 weeks. So we can see chrono prices here with that initial spike up from 65,000 to 700K on the 8th day to come back down into the 500 range. And then ever since then, it's been a lost cause. And this is over 50 some days now. And you can see the trend line is up, but over the last few days and data points, it has balanced off, and for the first time in a little bit of time, the barter price is actually below 1 million platinum for a chrono. So we'll see if that downward trend actually continues on as well, but we can see for sure coming from 55,000, 65,000 for a chrono before the trade depot exploit that the server has indeed been impacted by 15 to 20 times the amount of what it was in less than 2 months. And as I said in another video, the prices of Chrono have almost come near, and if not surpassed, prices on Mischief, which is a server that is 2 years older than Oakwynd. So that was a lot of destruction that happened to the economy, and it did deter a lot of people. It did cause a lot of boycott, and a lot of people left. You can see that it looks like a lot of players came back for the Planes of Power release. So maybe it was a temporary boycott, or maybe after Planes of Power, the server will truly die. Something randomly funny, while generating images for this video, I use AI to generate most of my images for thumbnails and backgrounds. And I typed in, gave the command for it to imagine the Planes of Power without even thinking. And this is what the image came back as. And then I realized that it's actually using real planes, which should have been obvious from the start. But this is what AI thinks of when it thinks of Planes of Power. So I thought that was kind of funny because it's actually real planes when I was actually referring to realms. One other thing that I should mention is that one of the comments I received on a video where I was tracking population data suggested possibly using the Bazaar online trade characters because there would not be a need to have multiple Bazaar characters. Now I know that's not always the case. I know when I played on Mischief, I had a Bazaar mule and I had a barter mule, so I did have 2 accounts solely dedicated to that. And in tracking this data, I realized that Mischief still has 100 to 200, depending on the time, more traders. Mischief is usually around 500 to 600. And Oakwynd sits between 300 and 400 usually for the points that I track. This would mean, if I were to use that as a statistic, that Mischief has 1.5 times the player base. Now we know that that's most likely not true. I think one of the reasons that Mischief has more auction characters is because of the free trade. So even though that was a good suggestion in the comments, I don't think that we can directly compare 2 servers where one is free trade and the other is not. There's just more of an incentive to sell items on Mischief, and the fact that everything that you do get will just about be tradable or sellable. You'll have more items to sell, including raid items and old gear. It almost makes sense to have a full-time dedicated account to be a Bazaar mule, where on Oakwynd it may not make as much sense because the account may not generate enough money to pay for itself, which on Mischief it did by far. By having a barter and a Bazaar mule, those accounts, just by being able to run 24/7, were able to pay for themselves. Obviously, you have to bring in the loot or do a lot of bartering or buying and selling to make up if you're not going to be farming. Now, I don't think that's likely the case on Oakwynd. There's probably not a lot of people farming too many things, maybe trade skill items and whatnot, some other drops. But if you think about on Mischief, you could farm all of the old Velius, Lucklin, Kunarg, like all those bosses, and their drops were mostly tradable except for the few exceptions, as well as all the raid loot and other loot for Epic 1.0s, 1.5, 2.0s, and then even 2.5 packages. So there was a lot of stuff that still farm. A lot of people, even when the expansion has progressed past where 2.5 epics are usable, still like to have those epics for click effects and whatnot. There's always going to be something to sell on Mischief, where I think on Oakwynd, besides trade skill items, you're not really going to be selling too many things that are going to have great value. So other than that, the most recent thing that I've done is run a 6-box combo off of a handheld gaming console, the Asus Rogue. You can check out in the video here. Highly recommend it if you're into 6-boxing but also want the portable handheld gaming console. So I will let you go while you go check that out.